Hello friends, Tanya here for Trinity Stamps, and today we're going to do a little bit of progressive creating. What do I mean by that? Well, we're going to start with this oval foliage die set, and I am going to create several projects that just seem to inspire each other. We're going to take the solid piece and die cut that out and then come back and line up the center piece by laying the detail die down and then use that to center our inside die. So I'm going to cut this out 4 times total. I will use this piece that I've just die cut as a guide for the remaining 3 pieces and die cut all of those all out. And then I will still have a solid back piece to make a fun shaker element. Now the next component I need for this shaker element is some clear acetate. I'm taking a piece of packaging here and I'm going to lay that on my very well used cutting plate, and then I'm going to add a piece of copy paper over the top of that, and that will actually help create your die cut images perfectly out of this acetate. Well, packaging. Next, I'm going to use the liquid glue. This happens to be the Crafty Glue Friend, which is available in the Trinity store, and I am allergic to it, so I'm going to use the Barely Arts glue. They're both excellent glues. I highly recommend both of them. And I'm going to adhere the first layer of this cardstock frame with the layer of the clear packaging or acetate. Next, I'm going to layer on the other 3 layers of the die cut frame to create the height and stability for our shaker element. It goes together pretty quickly, and even though this looks like it's completely symmetrical, it's not. So you have to be careful which way you add your pieces, because this is an eyeballed thing when you create the frame. So there's always going to be a little bit of difference in the different layers. Now that I have all of that, I am using a little bit of anti-static powder tool and used a big paintbrush to sweep those away. Next, we're going to use a couple of different embellishments. This is the Be Mine and the Clovers. These actually came together with a bunch of other embellishments, and I had some volunteers in my bag. And that prompted me to try to use this custom blend for my own purposes. I actually think these cute little hearts and these cute little clovers go very well together. There is also a little bit of the mini wrapped candy in there in a light bluish iridescent color, and they all play very well together. Now I want a little more of both of these kinds of embellishment, so I'm just tapping some more out of the container into our shaker element. Once I have enough of these embellishment pieces in our shaker element, we're going to seal this up. So I'm going to add a little more liquid glue on the back of all of our layers here, and we'll take our solid piece and seal it up. This one is actually nice and flat because it is just the many layers of cardstock and that piece of clear packaging, and I wanted that to be pretty flat. Next, I'm going to take some mowed lawn and Lucky Clover, and I'm going to create a background to cut out our foliage element, the detailed part of the foliage, oval foliage. Yeah. So I've inked up this entire piece of 8.5 by 5.5 inch cardstock, and I'm going to spritz it with a little bit of pearlized water, heat set that, then take our detailed die and cut it out twice. So I have a piece for 2 different shaker elements. I decided I wanted some green ink blending behind our foliage, so I took our fallout piece again, put that inside our oval to protect the shaker part, and ink blended over the entire thing with the mowed lawn. And I really like how that turned out. Now we're going to add some little dabs of glue on the back of our foliage element all around, just little dabs, and apply that to our shaker element to complete it. And it does shake rather nicely. This is the second version. I'm using some foam strips here, and I'm going to spoon in some elements to our shaker. Now this is going to be a little thicker, so we can use more of the embellishments. Just using my little pokey tool here to scoop out lots of embellishments. Didn't think it was quite enough, adding a little more. And then I'll seal up the back of the shaker element also. There we have two versions of our shaker method, shaker element. This one, again, has a whole lot more movement than this one. You can see the difference in the thickness. Two great ways to make shaker elements. Sometimes it's just fun to experiment. Now that I have these two shaker elements, I need to figure out what I want to do with them. And that's where the progressive creating comes in. So I've got next the checkered background add-on hearts, and I'm going to do some ink blending with this with some Kitsch Flamingo, Squeezed Lemonade, and Salvage Patina. And I'm just going to use these to make my own rainbow effect. I'll start at the top with the pink and go down a few rows of the hearts with the pink, and then switch to yellow and overlap those a little bit so I get a bit of a corally orange color. Now this is a 6x6 stencil, and this is an 8.5 by 5.5 inch piece of cardstock. So we're going to have to move the stencil and continue the stenciling all the way down. So I did clean off my stencil between sections so I didn't get some of the ink overlapping. I'm going to lay the stencil so that about 3 or 4 rows of the hearts overlap with a repeating pattern. This is really easy to extend and make into a longer stenciled project. Next we have the Salvage Patina, and again overlapping that a little bit with the yellow to create a green. Now I'm going to come back with the X portions of this stencil and do the same pattern. Same pink, yellow, and blue with overlapping and moving the stencil down to continue our pattern. And you get this really cute heart and X. It's kind of like X's and O's, heart and X pattern in a rainbow order. I have a specific image set for this in mind, and you'll see why it coordinates so well. Now the colors I chose really kind of match our confetti. Next, we're going to use the Modern Embossed A7 stack to cut this down to card size, and we're going to put this on a 5x7 card base. But to add another element, we're going to use the Sucker for You stamp set. Here I've got a piece of watercolor paper. I've prepared that with some embossing, with an embossing tool, or the embossing buddy. And I'm using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and I'm stamping it 3 times with that ink. Then I pulled out the holographic embossing powder from the Trinity Stamps shop. It has it's like a clear embossing powder with glitter mixed in. Next, we're going to use the Distress Oxide watercolor pencils. These are pretty awesome. I'm putting the color down just with our color pencil. And I will do all of the coloring at once. The colors are pretty vibrant. I do come back and add some extra colors here. Now I'm going to use an aqua brush and activate all of that colored pencil. You don't have to use water with these, but it really brightens them up and smooths out your image. I'm just using the back of my hand to get rid of the color that's on my brush between images. Now there's another way you can apply this color, and that's by picking it up directly from the pencil with your wet watercolor brush and then applying it to your image. This creates a bolder color right away. It's like dipping your watercolor brush right into a pan of watercolor paint. I really like how that method works, and these actually dissolve nicely onto your watercolor brush very quickly. Now I'm going to use some of the liquid pixie dust to add a little shimmer to this, and the paintbrush I pulled from my jar appears to have had a little bit of red in it. Now after I'm done with this one, I'm going to have to clean that little well of paint out, but it worked very well for our image here. There are coordinating dies for all of the images in that stamp set, and I used it to die cut our cute little sucker friend here. I did cut it a couple more times from some scrap cardstock to add a little height and dimension. I'm going to adhere one full one behind our image, and then I'm going to figure out where I need to trim off the extra, because I want this to be flush across our shaker element. So this part is the part that's going to go over the acetate or the packaging part so that it is flush with the frame when it's glued down. Again, just going to use liquid glue here to adhere it directly to our shaker element. I'll use a block here to put some pressure on it in the meantime. And then we're going to adhere our main background panel, which has a layer of scrap cardstock behind it for a little extra height and dimension again. And then we're going to glue our shaker element to the front of the card. Now the main image there has a good sentiment, but I want another one on the inside. This happens to say Happy Valentine's Day in a really fun font. Handwritten font. I just have a scrap of white cardstock. I'm using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink again. And I will pull out some clear embossing powder that I have in this big bin. I could have used the holographic again, but I didn't want the extra glitter on this particular part of the embossing. Here I'm heating it quickly, and then I will die cut that with the coordinating die, and we'll adhere that to the inside of our card. Just going to use my reverse tweezers here and some liquid glue to adhere that exactly where I want it on the inside of the card. I really prefer to take die cut sentiments and put them on the inside of the card. That way you don't accidentally mess up your sentiment. Next, we're going to take some more images from this stamp set. I'm going to use the outline X and the outline heart, and we'll use the same inks that we used on the front of the card. Just using a clear block to stamp those inside. We've got a heart, an X, and then we're going to use another heart. This is the yellow heart. Next, we're going to take some foil and this Art Deco foiling plate, and I foiled it on one sheet of paper with the positive, and then I took the leftover and used a solid foiling plate to get the negative, and got this beautiful background piece that I cut out a panel with the Modern Embossed A2 stack. I think this is the second from largest piece, and we'll adhere that directly to the front of an A2 card. And we have our other shaker element, and we'll adhere that directly to this card. This one comes together pretty quickly because the shaker element had already been created. Next, we're going to take this sweet brush stroked bunnies, And I'm going to use 3 of these bunnies to stamp onto this cardstock. This was a leftover piece that had some saltwater taffy and Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide inking on it. And I thought they would make very cute little bunnies. So I'm stamping all 3 of these bunnies that I've picked out with some juicy embossing ink. And I'm going to sprinkle on first some this is the white satin pearl, and I like how that looks, but I don't think it's bold enough for the front of the card. So I emboss it again, I stamp and emboss them again in white. Then I fussy cut these cute little bunnies, and I'm going to put these on the front of the card. But I also want some fun sentiments. This is the Slimline Bunnies, and there are a bunch of really cute punny bunny sayings. We're going to take the hopping by to say hi, and we're going to stamp that on a piece of cardstock that's been that was left over from the frames, the foliage frames. Stamped that in VersaFine Clair and embossed it with some white embossing powder. And then I took the Mini-Slimline dies, the stitched Mini-Slimline dies, took the smallest one, die cut out our sentiment, and now I'm going to glue that right inside the frame of our shaker element. Once I have that exactly where I want it, we're going to take our bunnies and adhere those to the frame. So there's one on each end of the sentiment strip and one jumping over the top of our sentiment. I think that is just the perfect accents to this adorable shaker card. I have to say this is my favorite of the shaker cards. Inside, we're going to take another sentiment from that Slimline Bunnies stamp set, the Some Bunny Loves You. And then we're going to take the white satin pearl embossed bunnies that I also fussy cut and adhere those along the bottom of the card. Very cute finishing for that card. The next of our progressive creating is I'm going to use the mini envelope die. There's a frame and there's the envelope die. And I had used the positive of the Art Deco foiling plate to die cut 2 of the matted pieces for that card, for this mini card. So the envelope die is very easy to put together. You just cut it out from one piece of paper, one piece of cardstock, and then you crease all of the score lines, add some adhesive to the flaps, and then just fold it back over the rest of the envelope. I did find a fun way to close this, but before we do that, this is a 3 3/4 by 5 inch piece of cardstock scored at 2.5. And then we're going to adhere this framed piece, this die cut piece. It has that lovely modern embossed edge, like so many of the dies, and we'll adhere that to the front of the card. See how it slides into this envelope just perfectly. Next, we're going to take the Dainty Scallop Heart die set that also has some foiling. It has the Love You foiling dies. And I am using the Emerald Facets foil. This is from the Shimmering Holiday set of foils. I foiled that on a piece of green cardstock, then die cut that with the coordinating heart from the Dainty Scalloped Hearts die set that also has this glimmer foil, which I absolutely love. I'm going to adhere that to the front of our card. I made 2 of these. So of course I'm making 2 cards. The Art Deco foil plate does create a large enough piece to do that. This is the row of hearts, and I die cut that again with a scrap of that ink blended cardstock and with a piece of cardstock I foiled with a chunk of that Emerald Facets foil. This is just gorgeous, cut out in these little hearts, and I'm going to use those in a variety of ways. We're going to adhere the ink blended die cut heart and the foiled die cut heart onto the larger heart, and then I'm going to take a couple pieces together. This is just a scrap white cardstock that I die cut from that row of hearts. I trimmed off the 2 top arches of the heart. So I just have the lower half of it, and now I'm adhering those together, and we're going to use these as a fun closure for our envelope. I don't know about you, but I really don't like it when my envelopes don't stay shut. And this makes a fun way to open and close this envelope without having to glue it shut. You just stick the tip of that flap behind our heart. That's all of the projects that I created today. I had a whole lot of fun coming up with progressive ideas while I created these. I hope you enjoyed this process and thought of some ways that you can incorporate it into your crafting. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Check that description box below for any of the products I used today, and check out a couple more videos I have here for you today. Until next time, bye-bye.